Speaker, I welcome the Minister's commitment to immediate relief, but with respect, I think that today is precisely the day we need to be talking about those broader causes. As we just heard, Gaston Brown, the leader of Antigua and Barbuda, is talking about climate change today. Can he reassure the House that we don't have to wait for a hurricane to hit the UK before we have the kind of policies we need from this government to tackle climate breakdown? Because without that, we are not going to see the climate leadership that his government likes to claim in theory actually being shown in practice.
I think the Honourable Lady has deeply misjudged the tone of this House today. We are seeing people in deep and urgent immediate need, and we are also leading the world on climate change, and she ought to show a bit more urgent and immediate humanity than make the point she's made today.
Well, Karen Lucas joins us from a Brighton constituency now. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Were you surprised by Sir Alan's response?
I was surprised. I think that it's interesting that, of course, Gaston Brown, the leader of Antigua and Barbuda, himself, right in the eye of the storm, was making the case about the role of climate change in the impact and severity of that storm. So he himself was talking about it. So this is not about inhumanity. Our hearts go out to all of those people affected by these terrible, terrible storms. But to pretend that there's no connection at all between human activity and the impact of those storms, I just think is irresponsible. And, you know, somehow it seemed to be impolite to raise climate crisis, climate breakdown at the time of the impacts being felt. But the trouble is that once that agenda has moved on, then no one's interested in talking about the climate crisis at all. And I think, as Gaston Brown said, today is the day we need to be talking about climate change.
Yeah, I don't want to put words in Sir Alan's mouth, but he seemed to suggest that you were attempting to score political points.
I absolutely refute that. I think that to have an event happen and to pretend that it was completely unrelated to human activity, that it was like the solar eclipse, if you like, it was entirely natural, that I think is irresponsible. That I think is inhumane. No one is saying that climate change causes hurricanes, but what increasing scientific evidence does demonstrate is that the intensity of those hurricanes is increased as a result of climate change. In other words, the wind speeds, the amount of rainfall, potentially the duration as well. And we have to start talking about these things. And it seems to me that if Gaston Brown himself, if the people in the Caribbean themselves are talking about climate change right now, then surely our responsibility is to do the same.
For sceptics of climate change, they will say that we've seen Category 5 hurricanes over the years. In Cuba in 1932, there's a Category 5 storm, 3.25 days it lasted. Hurricane Allen in the 1980s, that lasted for 3 days. Hurricane David in 1979 lasted just over a day. Were all of those caused by climate change?
I'm not a climate scientist. I'm going by what the evidence tells me, the evidence of people like the International Panel on Climate Change, which brings together the greatest climate scientist brains in the world. And they are saying, and many other scientists are saying, vast majority of scientists are saying, that the impact of hurricanes is made worse by a warming climate. Some of that is because, for example, when the sea is warmer, when the oceans are warmer, then that means that the impact is greater too, because you've got higher sea level rise, and so the storm surges, the impact of those will be greater as well. So I'm not pitting myself against climate skeptics. I'm saying let us look at those people who have spent the most time studying these issues, which are global scientists, and they are saying that the impact of hurricanes like Irma, like Harvey, are made worse by a warming climate. And I think we need to listen to them.
Yeah, but those who refute those claims will say that, yes, global temperatures have increased over a period of time, but that increase is moderate, so therefore it's had very little impact.
I'm sorry, I'm on a Skype line and I'm going in and out of reception, so I didn't catch what you were saying there. But I really don't want this interview, and I don't think this interview is helpful to go back to whether or not the vast majority of the scientific consensus says that a warming climate has an impact, a negative impact in terms of the severity of hurricanes. I think that is absolutely there in the science. What we need to be talking about is what we're going to do about it. And that means that our government, along with governments right across the world, need to be getting a lot more serious about not subsidising the use of fossil fuels, for example, about not having a mad rush for fracking, about not cutting back, as we have in this country, the support for energy efficiency, for renewable energies. You know, those are the green economic measures that can make a real difference. And our government, as other governments around the world, have a responsibility to be pursuing them. And I think now more than ever, that's becoming clear.
So on the points of what are we going to do about it right now, do you think the Conservative government has the political will to do something about it, to address all of those concerns that you've just highlighted?
Unfortunately, I think this government is going in exactly the wrong direction when it comes to investment in green energy. We've seen public investment in green energy go down. We've seen them scrap energy efficiency schemes. We've seen them scrap schemes that would make sure that new homes are being built to higher environmental standards. They are pursuing fracking with a great vengeance. They are pursuing great extrication of fossil fuels from the seas. So they are going in the wrong direction. And to pretend that those actions don't have consequences, I think, is irresponsible. Now, that's not solely our country. Of course it's not. It's countries around the world. But if we're to be serious about those pledges that were made not so long ago at the Paris climate talks, then we all have to step up. And if we don't, then the kind of awfulness that we're seeing in the Caribbean now, I think, is going to get worse in its severity, because these hurricanes, when they do happen, are likely to be a lot more powerful.
Caroline Leakus, really appreciate your time. Thank you. So this on Sky News. Still to come.